3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a webinar with Dan Noma. The title of our webinar today is Disruption or Opportunity, and how to work with instant offers and win more deals with iBuyers, institutional buyers. Dan, just a brief bio, and I'll give it, and then you can fill it in. But he's the owner of a brokerage called Venture REI out of Arizona. Are you guys out in more places than just the Phoenix, Arizona area?
Yep, Phoenix Metro. So we cover all the Phoenix Metro.
Great, and I know that Venture REI really acts as a brokerage, but like a technology brokerage company that offers a wide range of technology tools to help their agents win more. How big is your brokerage, if you don't mind?
So right now we're at 220 agents all in.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been around?
So it's our 11th year in the game. So 11 years Venture REI has been around. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
Getting old, man. Getting old.
Well, I know you were 30 under 30 in real estate. So, well, and then also you're the founder of iRealEstatePro, which enables agents through education and tools to work with instant offer companies, whether that's an iBuyer, institutional buyer, a technology company to close more homes and provide. I've heard on a few webinars you've done that just like a better consumer experience, which I'm excited to learn more about. But you guys launched this, I think, just a few years ago, right?
We did, yeah. So iReps, this coming up August will be our 3rd year in existence. So
wow, and I feel like the more people, I've interacted with a lot of people via email that have an iReps certified little signature on the line. How many, if you don't mind sharing, or like roughly how many are certified through you guys now? Yeah,
in total, I think we're at the number somewhere around 3,500 in total agents around the country that have gotten themselves certified. And so there are, very different degrees of how they use the tool and how they leverage our technology. But it's been great. Pre-COVID, gosh, I was traveling around the country. It seemed like every day I was in a different city. So it's been nice to be home, but I'm ready to get back out in the streets, man, and talk to some people.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys are in most markets then?
We are, yeah. I would say all your major metros. We've got agents in 35 markets now.
Wow, man, that's incredible growth. Kudos.
Yeah.
Well, so most of this webinar is going to be Dan. He's got a deck he's going to be sharing, and he's going to be walking through how to do it. And then, maybe some guidance on if you want to get iRealEstatePro certified. I'm sure there'll be some guidance there, but the title is Disruption or Opportunity, and how to win with instant offers and iBuyers. And Dan, I'll start off with one question, and then I'm going to hand the ball off to you, and then we'll let, if you guys have questions, I can play moderator, just put it in the chat function. And if not, I have plenty of questions I can ask. We have, roughly 45 minutes to an hour. But the first question, I feel like most conversations that I have with agents still today, they view iBuyers, institutional buyers as the enemy, the threat. And you don't. That's not how you view it. You saw it a different way. You saw it as an opportunity, obviously. Disruption or opportunity, as the title suggests. Why and how and when did you see this as an opportunity, and how did you come to that realization?
Yeah. I think, JP, I think it all starts, for me, it's all mindset, right? So just like anything else, anything we start in our environment here, it all starts with mindset. If I start a meeting, I start it with mindset. Anything I touch, it's got to start there. And I believe that the iBuyer, for me, being that I was so focused on the way that I think about things, that, I looked at it from a different lens right out of the gate. And I wish more agents would give this an opportunity, because the reality is these guys, what the analogy I use for people when I'm talking about this is, I said, like JP, and you guys are in Austin, and if I came to you and I said, hey man, I've got my rich uncle, he's a billionaire, and he's moving to Austin, Texas, and he wants to buy single family homes, and he's willing to buy them as is, and he's willing to pay cash, and he's willing to pay pretty close to fair market value for them. Would you work with him? And most agents say, yeah, right? They all say, yeah. And yet that is the opportunity, right? Yet they won't actually embrace it, right? So I think that, and I share this in my deck, and we'll talk about this later, but like the mantra that I stick to, and I hope agents can, if they take nothing away from our conversation today, take this away, that I believe that any set of circumstances can be leveraged for individual or collective gain if viewed masterfully, right? So anything that is pushed on us as an industry, we just have to figure out our view and like how we're going to actually play with this. And what I learned about working with these iBuyers and tech companies was I could actually give my consumers something that I couldn't before, right? That the experience was totally different. And I was solving problems that I didn't even realize they had until the iBuyer came along, right?
Yeah.
We'll get into that a
Yeah.
little bit. So.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, Dan, I'm going to hand the ball off to you to get into it, but I'm super curious of like, if I want to start working with an iBuyer, how does that even process work? Because I look at like the open doors, the Zillows, the Redfin Now offering. I'm sure there's so many that are coming out. Like it's a beast. So it's like, where do you even start? But I'm sure you'll get into that here soon.
Yeah, we'll share a little bit of that. And I'll leave some time obviously for questions. And, if you guys have questions as we're chatting away, I know this is a loose conversation. I want to keep this conversational. If I sit here and talk all day, I'll get super bored. So, so a couple stats to kind of give you guys to kind of frame how big this industry has become, right? I think a lot of agents turn a blind eye to how big it actually is, but here's a number that I think you'll find staggering is that every 34 minutes, an iBuyer technology company purchases or transacts on a home. So how many of us are doing that, right? How many of our companies are actually even doing that kind of volume? Where's my clicker?
And Dan, would it be possible for or I guess this will all be on a webinar. So I was going to see if we could get the deck, but we'll be.
Yeah, I'll share it with you. Yeah,
cool.
We'll share it with you guys too. They can have this. Another interesting number here is like $30 billion have been invested in the real estate and tech disruption in the last 8 years alone, right? So the point of this is think about the amount of money that's being dumped into disrupting our industry. I'll use Opendoor as an example here. Opendoor, early on, this is going back 6 years ago, they got a D round funding from the largest bank in the world. You don't get $1 billion from people if you're wrong, right? You get $1 billion from people when you're right on something. And I think that that's the confusion. And, while we're measuring them about not making money and all of these things, like I've heard every excuse in the world, I think the thing to keep in mind that there's a lot of people that are probably, a little bit more graduated than us. I'll use that as the phrase that have said that this is real and they want to disrupt our industry in one way, shape, or another. And so I think that we would be foolish not to believe that there's some sort of change, right? More change is going to happen in the next 24 months in our industry than I think you're ever going to see in the lifetime of our industry. So I think we've got a significant changes coming along the board. Another thing that we focus on, JP, is we focus on the institutional REIT, right? So, my story starts way back in 2010 when I worked with the first ever institutional REIT. It was born here in Phoenix. And I had an opportunity to work with one of my clients who basically created the plumbing for how these institutional REITs work. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. To give you some perspective on that, 250,000 homes are owned by single-family REITs today. Gosh. And this is a number that I got this week. So this came from Burns data this week. So John Burns is kind of considered the national economist with housing data, and has been for about 30 years. Their firm is fantastic. If you guys get a chance, check out John Burns data. But John said that 20.6% of all home sales in these states, so California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, Florida, and Colorado in Q1 were sold to institutional REITs. So that means Wall Street has a 20% market share in these markets today. Wow, 20%, right? So like to brush this under the rug, it seems a little foolish. And the reason is that there's this newfound money that's jumping into this space is because there's this global search for yield, right? So these big banks, these big institutional giants, they're reallocating away from bonds. The bond market is just not what it used to be. And so if you guys study economics, like these big banks used to buy bonds because they were pretty secure. They gave off a yield. They could invest some dollars. They were doing okay on these bonds. Well, that bond market, not so good. And so now there's this search for yield, and they're dumping into assets that they normally haven't. So I think this is the most important financial shift that we've seen in the last 15 years. This is just not something that gets talked about a lot. But the reality is now there's a reallocation of where they're allocating their money, right? So the bond market's shifted into single family for rent. That's what they're looking for. A statistic from Zillow.
Yeah, Dan, actually, real quick. So you talked about iBuyers, and then you talked about like kind of like an open door, and then you talked about institutional buyers. Do you mind just like, is there a difference? What's the difference?
There is, yeah. So, I would say your iBuyer, I categorize those guys in what I call the zoo, the Zillow, OfferPad, Open Door. That's the zoo. Those are your big three iBuyers. But iBuyer is not a new technology. There's nothing new about what they do. If you think about it, JP, remember that little ugly house guy, the We Buy Ugly Houses character?
Yeah.
That's a 30-year-old company, right? So like that's nothing new about what they do. But the way we categorize iBuyers, we say that the iBuyer is someone that's just transactional, right? So I think of them as a trampoline. They want to create a marketplace for consumers to sell their property without friction, and then move into a new destination property in a frictionless kind of way, right? Where the buyer comes in and buys this property. There's very little hold time, so they're not actually holding these assets. When I talk about an institutional investor, right, or a bank that's buying houses, what these banks do is these banks are buying these houses. They rent them. So they stabilize them by renting them. They rent the asset, and then they turn them into publicly traded REITs, right? So the strategy is interesting. We could talk about institutional REITs on another webinar, but
sure.
That's a whole conversation, whole world of real estate that's happening out there. But what these guys do is, like, for example, they'll buy 20,000 homes across the country in, say, a 2-year strategy, and they will spend, say, $7 billion on something like that. They will go to market, so they'll go to Wall Street, one-day sale. They'll sell that same $7 billion fund for $11 billion in the public market. Well, they just made $3 billion. Now you just take your $3 billion, leverage it again, rinse and repeat, continue doing that. You're playing on house money. So if you're wondering why they're snowballing and why they're buying so many houses, it's because the model works and people keep buying the stock. So it's very simple, right? And so the institutional REIT, more buy and hold. The iBuyer would just be flippers. They're transacting to flip. iBuyers are expected to be in all 50 states by 2025. If you guys read anything about, Open Door and OfferPad in their most recent news of going public, this was a big piece of the puzzle, is that this is something that they're actually being now measured by, that they have to expand into all 50 states, right? So this is something that you're going to keep an eye on, because I think you're going to see them in all 50 states. And we've seen the first one now pop up in the Northeast, right? So OfferPad and Zillow offers are now available in Rhode Island and Boston, which is like the first of them going those directions. So, JP, I travel all over the place. I hear agents talk about iBuyers. And these are some of my favorites, right? This is my favorites list of what agents are saying. They say, they aren't making any money. They're trying to eliminate real estate agents. It's just a fad. They're lowballing customers. The Zestimate is wrong. Like, that's my favorite one. It used to be that the Zestimate, if you remember, I used to tell the agents or my clients that the Zestimate was 30 days late and 30% off. Right. Well, in my market, so I'm in Phoenix, my market, they now are using the Zestimate as their offer price.
Yeah, I saw that.
So the Zestimate's no longer off, right? The Zestimate's a real number. And I can tell you that, like, we've actually studied it, and we think it's within a 1% of what we would actually list the property for. And that, that variable, that's totally subjective, right? Like, so that would say that's net zero.
Right.
So they're spot on now. So that algorithm is actually working really, really well.
Yeah.
And then a lot of agents, like I said, they say, well, this isn't going to affect my business. Well, okay. Let me tell you why, right? Why this would actually happen. Here's a couple things to think about, is that, Zillow obviously is the biggest player in our game, but they're really a data company, by trade. That's really their kind of core business model. And they have this conference every year called Zillow Unlock. And during Unlock, they shared some statistics, and these are some stats from that conference. So they measured every consumer that they could. They surveyed these consumers that went through their platform and worked with real estate agents. And they came up with this data set. And they said that 54% of the consumers that transacted last year were first-time sellers, okay? 66% of the time, they're buying and selling at the same time, right? So that consumer dilemma of buying and selling at the same time. Here's some of the selling activities to think about. 73% of sellers had improved the property before they sold it, right? So 73% of the time they're doing paint, carpet, something to the property before they're actually going to list it for sale. 62% of the time they were lowering the list price at least once. Maybe that's different today. 82% of the time there's some sort of concession at close, closing costs, what have you. 40% of the time there's some sort of offer fall through, inspection, fall through, something like that. Sure. And then this big one down here is this almost 4 times, right? A consumer has to leave their home when selling it. So they've got to leave their property when selling it, which is just kind of crazy if you think about it, because, like I always put I'm the example of this. I'm the perfect example. I've got, I think this, I have 5-year-old triplets at home, right? So
how you doing?
Yeah. So the idea of me picking up all the toys and all the clothes and all the things that these guys have to get my home ready for showing 4 times, to me sounds pretty monumental, right? Like it sounds big enough to where like I might consider a different option. Yeah. And then this is the one thing that really stood out to me is they said 95% of sellers said that at least one selling activity was too stressful for them or their family. So when we think about like why is this happening, right? Well, I just gave you a bunch of statistics on why. Why are these companies being created? They're being created to create frictionless or relieve some of the stress of the real estate transaction. Like the way that these guys think about real estate is they think that our model is currently broken. And the consumers are agreeing with us, right? So here's all of the things that cause the stress, right? Time frame, price, preparing the home for sale, fall through. These are all the stressors that consumers think about. It's kind of wild, right? And 61% of the time. How about this one? Too stressful to try to time the sale of their current home with the purchase of a new one. How many of you guys are playing that game right now, right? But how many of these iBuyer and technology companies have come out to solve this exact problem? Lots, right? They all kind of solve this problem. So when I talk about iBuyer and tech, like the reason that I'm so interested and focused on this is that this was a problem for me and my clients. Like this timing mechanism of being able to time the sale and the purchase at the same time has always been a problem. I've been at this for 20 years. This has been a snag until I was able to offer a solution that relieved this friction. And when I did, it changed my consumer relationship with sales. Like I actually created more sellers. Gary Keller is kind of famous at one of the Keller conferences to suggest that the internet didn't create more buyers and sellers, right? That's one of his famous quotes. The internet did not create buyers and sellers. He believes that the internet just created leads that groups like Zillow, et cetera, could sell to us as real estate agents. And, when I talk about iBuyer, actually, I kind of use his thinking here. And I say, well, I actually think that the iBuyer technology companies, because of the value propositions that they've provided us as agents and consumers, they've actually created more transactions. So let's not beat these guys up, because there was a lot of consumers that were sitting on the sidelines that couldn't transact, that are now transacting as a result of leveraging some of these technologies. Here's another one. How about this one? 40% of the time, their wealth is tied up in their current home. I would say that's most people, right? Like my friends, families, whatever, their home is their biggest asset, right? And so this number is actually probably pretty light in my macro market, right? Absolutely wild. We can go through all kinds of statistics here, but when agents say why, I think that what we have to understand is that all technologies were created to solve some sort of consumer problem, right? And they don't just create them and spend millions of dollars creating these things because they have no time or they have just excess time. They create them because they recognize these consumer stresses and they just simply create a solution around it, right? And that's the methodology of creating all kinds of technology. And so I actually think we're lucky to have these things now, that we can actually provide these options to our consumers. And how do we do this, right? So the thing I'll tell you guys is like iBuyers and tech companies come in all shapes and sizes, right? They all have different um, different unique consumer value propositions that they can deliver. The institutional REIT delivers a totally different value proposition than an iBuyer. How about your private local investors, right? We talked about UGG, the little ugly house guy. I think everybody's got one of those in their market. That's like, yeah, it's a 35-year-old company, but they're local investors, right? Those are local franchisees that own those things. And how many of us know a local investor in our market that would make an offer, an instant offer on a property, should we ask, right? Friends, family members, us as real estate agents, right? Like we understand that commission suppression is real. I think that like that argument's already been beat to death. And the reality is like, in order for us to survive in this industry and live the lifestyles that we're so accustomed to now, we have to do more volume. And so by leveraging these transactions in these tech companies, we can actually cut down our time of transaction and do more transactional volume, right? It's actually made our jobs simple and easier. The thing about iBuyers, that analogy that I shared with you earlier was like, look, you know, if I had the $1 billion uncle that was moving to Austin, Texas, when Eric Wu, so the gentleman in this picture down here, this is the CEO of Opendoor, right? So he's kind of most famous for being the first or the leader in the pioneering the iBuyer space. When Eric, you know, if you ask Eric, and I've heard him have this conversation publicly, if you ask Eric what he created, he's going to tell you that he created a real estate technology company. The word iBuyer was created by us as real estate agents. Like we developed that word. That was a word that we just came up with. But I think that we should just drop the I as an industry and just say that they're buyers, right? Because that's really all that they are. They just want to buy houses. Like we all have access to $1 billion uncle. Let's go leverage that guy, right? Like we should never have a shortage of buyers when we do this. Let's talk a little bit about the consumer. Because I think that's where all this starts, right? Is the consumer is shifting, right? And they're shifting from a model that what we interpreted that they wanted to now we're seeing this Amazon effect, right? They want everything now. They want it super convenient and they want it now. They're also demanding certainty, right? I used to believe, right, that I, as a real estate broker, because I had access to the MLS, that I had significantly better data than everybody else in my market, right? Any consumer in my market. Well, again, get on Zillow and take a look around and you're going to see how good the data is on Zillow today, right? Like a consumer access to information has gotten so significantly better than it was in the past. The other thing is like, I think consumers want complete control of their decision-making process, right? We get control in every other consumer experience that we have. Any other consumer buying or selling that we do, we have full control. And now we're met with a real estate transaction where we lose all that control. And, you know, no offense, but we give that control over to a real estate agent that has 90 hours of training and a real estate license, but we have no idea whether or not they can transact, right? And that's a challenge. Consumers have this huge desire for transparency. They want all the facts, right? They want to know this information. I think that's almost that millennial, and you know, you and I, and probably a lot of our peers, is like, we just always have had it. That's how we're trained. We're trained for transparency. And if we're not providing that transparency to our consumer, we're going to lose. Again, data is everywhere on the web. Consumers like things that are techie. They want the new sexy products, right? That's the game. And then they want these painless transactions. So I believe that agents just have to shift. It's not that we're done. I think that we just have to shift what we do. We have to, sorry, my computer's doing this funky thing here. We have to shift into being a trusted advisor, right? So it used to be, I remember like my parents selling their home when I was a kid, and the real estate agent would walk in, and you know, my parents would just believe and do everything that this guy said, right? But it was based on this premise that he was the ultimate expert. What I believe now is that because we have access to all this information, if we try to play that same game where we just show up and sell ourselves as the trusted expert, we're probably going to lose, right? And what we should be doing is shifting into more an advisory role, just being the bridge between all these technology companies, then if the best option is to list the property traditionally, the way we traditionally done, then we do that too, right? And I think that's an interesting way to play.
Yeah.
I believe CMAs and marketing as a lead gen tool is probably dead, right? The idea of just bringing a CMA to a listing presentation, when you have the option to actually bring buyers to a listing presentation, like the example I use here, JP, is like, think about if you and I were competing against a listing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I show up to my listing presentation and I've got this awesome CMA. It's sweet, right? I've got all the comparable properties that have sold in the neighborhood. And then you show up and you've got offers on their home. Like the day of the listing, you show up and you've got offers for their property. Who's getting that listing, you think?
Oh,
right?
Easily me. Yeah.
Yeah, right. All day long. So we as agents can leverage these buyers as a tool in our toolbox. I'm not even suggesting that the instant offer or the iBuyer or the tech or REIT or anybody is the end all be all solution of every single case. I would be foolish to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that it should just be a tool in our toolbox, right? And if we're going to live in a world of complete transparency with our consumers, and we're going to provide them, with all of this information, then they drive by a billboard on their way to a listing appointment that talks about an iBuyer, right? So they drive by an open door billboard on their way to the listing appointment home. And then you show up to the listing presentation and don't even bring up Zillow as an option. I think we actually lose credibility by not doing that, right? I think our sellers start to question why not, right? So like a good analogy there is like, my mom used to tell me not to go play in my neighbor's backyard, right? She used to say this all the time, don't go play in the neighbor's backyard. Well, she'd go like pick my sisters up at basketball practice or whatever. And immediately she pulled out of the driveway and I'm jumping in my neighbor's backyard because I want to go see what's over there. And that's what we're doing as real estate people because we're not bringing these options to our clients. If we don't bring them, they're going without us. It's happening, right? They're statistically, like there was a while where the iBuyer was sharing this data with us and they were sharing how many consumers were going to the iBuyer direct without ever calling a real estate agent. It's shocking. In Phoenix, it was 78% of consumers, 78% of sellers that listed their property on the MLS with a real estate agent went to Open Door first before contacting the real estate agent.
That's massive, Dan.
Right.
Massive. Wow.
And because they've made it easy, right? The easy solution, the easy button is put my address in here, get an instant offer. Maybe that offer works. Okay, great. That's what they're catching. If that offer doesn't work, let me call my trusted agent, right? Well, why are we between that? Why are we making them choose between us and iBuyer? We should be the person that brings that option to them because if they go without us, I believe they're gone forever, right? If they go through this consumer experience, right? And I'll kind of back up a little bit. When we talk about these technology companies and everybody says to me, Dan, they're not making any money. It's not going to last. I think the thing that we have to recognize is like Amazon, right? Who was not profitable for 14 years. Uber, who's I think had their first profitable quarter, or maybe not yet.
Yeah.
They're measured a different way, right? They're not measured in dollars and cents the way that we measure our success. They're measured in consumer scores, right? In these scores. And what happens is at the end of every iBuyer transaction, they all do this, the consumer gets a survey. And the last question of that survey says, how likely are you to refer Open Door, OfferPad, Zillow, any of these REITs, whatever? How likely are you to refer us to a family member or loved one in the future?
Yep.
And right now, their consumer scores are 9 out of 10 consumers say that they would. So if you have that great of an experience going over there without your real estate agent, and you're willing to refer that to someone else, think about the exponential growth that starts to create for these iBuy technology companies. It's a big deal, right?
Yep.
So I think we gotta just recognize some things.
Yeah, and Dan, can I actually ask you a quick question on that? That stat is kind of blowing my mind about the 78%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you have, like as an agent, I'm like, I have to be at least familiar with them and start working with them in some capacity because that's just it's a big volume. Any idea of like how many of those 78% actually ended up transacting with Open Door compared to agents?
JP, that's not a stat that I have, but I can tell you that like in my market, Open Door has a significant market share,
Yeah.
somewhere around 15% market share. One company, 15%, and I think we're the third biggest market in the country, right? So
Sure.
like, it's a big number of consumers that are willing to transact this way, and I don't think we as real estate people should bother arguing with whether consumers should do this or not. Like, I
Yeah.
think that ship has sailed, in my opinion. I think what we need to understand is like consumers are doing this. Open Door and all these iBuyer companies, they have really, really good marketing skills and they have a ton of money behind that marketing strategy. So if we don't bring it, we're actually just losing. We're just losing, and we're losing the battle, right? And again, I am not an iBuyer. I'm a real estate broker. I told you I have over 200
Yeah.
agents in my brokerage.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my job to make sure that my agents make money and survive in this industry. And so I'm not advocating for iBuyer here. What I'm advocating for is consumers. I'm advocating for consumer choice and the idea that the consumer should drive the decision. And what we thought was true, we thought that consumers always wanted the most money in the shortest period of time. Like, I don't know if that they still teach that in real estate school, but they probably do. I think what these technology companies have proven to us is that's just not true, right? That consumers are willing to pay for some sort of convenience or to solve some consumer need. And as long as they see value in that, they're willing to pay for that convenience, right? And we as real estate people just need to understand that people are willing to pay for stuff. Like, and maybe it's not the most money in the shortest period of time that's driving their habits or their decisions. It's something else. It's some external factor that's doing that.
Interesting.
So
yeah, really cool.
So back on this stuff, how do we survive? Like, I get this question all the time from agents.
Yeah.
What do we do? Well, I think it's actually quite simple. I think that we just need to, like I said, shift as an advisor. And I think that means that we need to become the iBuyer and technology expert in our community. We are real estate professionals, licensed real estate professionals. These are real estate technology companies in our space, and our consumers are exposed to them. And therefore, I think that we have to be the expert. We have to know this stuff. Like, the worst thing I think we can do as a listing agent or a trusted agent of any of our consumers is if a customer calls us and says, hey, I heard about this company Zillow that's buying houses. What do you know about them? And then we go, I don't know anything about it. Or, you don't want to do that. That doesn't sound good. Like, think about the credibility that you just smashed with a consumer. Like, that could be a 10, 20-year relationship that you just lost by not knowing. So I think it's important that we know. We just have to guide the consumer through that iBuying experience. There's not an iBuyer in the country that won't work with a real estate agent. They all will. Right? They have a bad rap from like the early days of iBuying, where a lot of real estate agents banded together and started to beat up the model because they were threatened by it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's important to recognize is that they don't feel the same way about us. They actually all really want to work with real estate agents. They built these tools for us and for consumers. But what they're met with is a lot of like restriction and a lot of fight from the real estate agent community, which, I think is a little bit unfair. Like I said, I think we should bring offers instead of CMAs to sellers. I think that the CMA is basically dead. This is the first time in our industry where we can strive for 100% transparency, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, think about, like, if I go back 10 years and I was sitting with a seller, I was basically pulling up a CMA. I would price their property, and then wish and hope was my strategy. I wished and I hoped that I could find a buyer when I put this property out in the MLS, and that would work for them.
Yeah.
But now what I'm learning is, like, if I just put all of these options in front of them, they might pick one and I might be done. I might be able to sell this thing right away. But the key is, like, I actually put all available options in front of them, and the consumer drove the decision.
Yeah.
Now there's no like seller's remorse or buyer's remorse when they're going through this process. And I can do more volume, right?
Yeah.
I can do more transactional volume because the workload's been reduced by leveraging these technologies.
Yeah.
So I think, as long as we're pro consumer choice, we're a winner.
Yeah. And it's interesting that consumers are more educated now on what those options are.
Yeah.
I don't know this for a fact. This is anecdotal, but it feels that in the real estate industry is the most talked about industry at this like point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, any friends houses that I go to, everybody's talking about, wow, have you seen like what's going on with real estate? Like there's nothing out there. Everything's going over for 30%. Like it's like dominating just like family and friends conversations at this point.
Right. Yeah.
And people know what options they have available with Zillow. Like, you know, even Saturday Night Live doing a skit on Zillow. I don't know if you saw that, Dan.
Yeah, that's funny.
But it was funny in it. But it was just
Yeah.
these companies are the consumers know about them. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
they absolutely do. And you know what's funny too is like my certified agents around the country, they come back to me all the time, and you know, because I play this game where I'm like, you know, the next time you go to a party and you tell people you're a real estate agent and they start barking at you about like what you think they should do, right? So they say to you, hey JP, you know, man, that's awesome, you're a real estate guy, you know, I'm thinking about selling my house, but you know, I'd be worried that I wouldn't find a place to go, and I wouldn't have time, and to time that would just be a pain in the butt. And then we as the real estate agent used to say, yeah, that's difficult, but I'm happy to guide you through that process.
Yep.
Well, like, I don't know about you, but that didn't give me any comfort. Like, I don't feel good about that. I'm like, I just met you at a party. You have a beard. Like, that's not doing me any good. But what if you said to them, hey, I've actually got a technology that solves that problem, right? What they'll do, like Opendoor does this program they call late checkout. And by leveraging late checkout, we could sell your home to Opendoor. You can stay in the home for up to 2 weeks post-closing at no additional cost, so that you can transition into your destination property. And in fact, there's even ways that you're going to get credits by doing that. Like you can actually save a ton of money by doing it.
Yeah. It's way different. That the first one is theoretical. Like I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
That's practical. That's real.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I always say like wish and hope is just not a strategy. You know, that to me is just not a strategy. So,
that's what I tell my sales team.
It's not going to work, you know? So, you know, I think that what we can do as agents, like what can we do today, right? So if your listeners are listening in here, like I got some tips and tricks in here that I think that they can take home today and start putting to practice right now. I think, you know, focus on these unique consumer value propositions you can offer. Start talking about the key consumer value propositions that these iBuyers offer, right? So I just went over the Opendoor late checkout program. But what about like OfferPad offers a free local move, right? Or Knock, right? Knock will actually buy your destination property for you before you have to sell your current one, right? You can get a new mortgage on that property without having to sell your current house. Like you actually move into the house and then sell your destination property. Like how cool is that?
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you any money. Like it costs you no more money to transact this way. So you start having those types of conversations and watch what happens. Like even in your social media posts, as you guys are talking about this stuff, as you learn it, talk about it. Watch how consumers react. Like your audience will react differently to this. The other thing I'll kind of, you know, tout you guys a little bit here, especially is creating your own leads, right? I think that we are, you know, I'm not going to get on my Zillow salt box over here and try to preach about buying leads and all of those things. I think like we as a real estate community understand that like internet leads are what they are. They have a conversion rate that just is. And, but there's better ways, right? And then we can actually leverage phone animal, right? Or leverage a call center and pick up the phone and have conversations with consumers, meaningful conversations by solving their problems, right? So you start hiring a company like Phone Animal, you put a script together, and I think you guys have hundreds of these things by now, specifically about one of these value propositions, right? Like, or arm them with all of the value propositions and give them, you know, 2 or 3 tricks on the phone. You know, a consumer, hey, would you ever be interested in selling your home? Or what if I told you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that I had a buyer that wants to buy your home? They've been buying hundreds of homes around the area, and they're really, really interested in buying your home. And it's really simple. All I need to do is come by the property. I got to take some pictures. I've got to fill out a little bit of a property condition report. And then I'll get you the offer on the home. And if the offer works for you, great. And if not, then we can talk about what the other options are. Like, think about that conversation versus the old conversation of, hey, I'm Dan Noma and I'm an awesome real estate agent. I've been selling homes in the area for 15 years, and I just sold a home in your neighborhood, and I think I can find another buyer that might be interested in buying yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a totally different game. Like, I can tell you that the instant offer platform, like, I never got involved in phone conversation. Like, I was always a relationship broker. That's
Sure.
just how I built my business. And then once I realized that there was this subset of consumers that was really willing to transact, or at least give us all their information, because I was providing an instant offer, like, I watched the growth of the iBuyer, and I was like, why don't I just do that? Why don't I offer them the instant offer? Like, I'll just get it from Opendoor, but I'll have them come to me, and I'll have that conversation. I'll make Phone Animal make the calls, and I'll sit back. Once they get a warm and fuzzy lead, they'll call me and go, hey, Dan, we got you a hot lead. I contact the consumer, get the offers from the iBuyers, present them. Whether they accept the iBuyer offer or not, I kind of don't care. What I do care about is that I'm involved in the transaction. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah. It's something, not to, whether this is a plug, not, I won't go for a plug for Phone Animal, but just a plug for getting, like, creating your own leads.
Yeah.
I mean, the statistics of 78% of consumers went to Opendoor before going to an agent. I mean, you're already behind the ball if you're waiting for people to come to you. They already know their options out there.
Yeah.
You've got to go find that person earlier in their cycle. So yeah.
I mean, I tested this. So JP, I'm a nerd, man. So, like, I nerd out on, like, I nerd out on, like, consumer thinking and the way people do stuff. And so I tested this, and I said, okay, I'm going to just, like, strategize and test this. I've got this mindset coach. We go out and we do all these crazy consumer experiences or experiments. And the one thing that I studied is, we went to a gas station, and I said, okay, I'm just, instead of, like, trying to, like, talk to these people, I'm actually going to go up to them, and I'm going to offer to buy their car. And I'm going to see how many of them are willing to sell me their car. Right. So they're at a gas station, and I'm walking around the gas station. I'm going one by one, pump by pump. And I'm going, hey, I've got a buyer that wants to buy this car. Like, all I need is, like, your card, your contact information. And they want to make you an offer to buy your car.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I suppose there's a price for everything. Right. Like, how many people told me that? That's the same reaction you get when you have that conversation with people selling their home. It's the same reaction, right? But now this person comes into your data bank, whether they transact with you or not right now, it's almost irrelevant. Like, obviously we want them to, but now that they're in my data bank, when it is time to sell and something happens, or they're going to move across country or whatever that may be, I'm in their mind, right? Like, I'm the guy that actually put them into my data bank. So start making these deposits in that bank. And it's super interesting how you can actually get people to do what you want them to do just by putting the right value proposition in front of them.
Interesting.
What I say to people is, like, what do you even say? Like, and I don't know if you've ever heard me, when I do a live presentation with an audience, I'll usually pick on a person, I'll pull them out, and I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, who makes phone calls? Like, who actually does cold calling or circle prospecting? And they, yeah, I do. Okay, cool. Come here. What do you say? Like, what is your script? And it's usually like, hey, I'm Dan, I'm awesome. And, I really, really think I can sell your property. I've got, all of these super awesome skills. I take great photos. I do all this stuff. Like, and I just go, okay, like, cool. What'd you guys think? And everyone's like, oh yeah, it sounds great. Cool. All right. What if I said something different? What if I said to you, hey, I've got a buyer that wants to buy your house. Like, I've got an offer ready to go today. They want to buy your property. Room goes silent, right? The guy goes and sits down, because, like, what are you even saying anymore? I mean, you're not competing with these guys unless you're playing the game.
Yep.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
I think we got to
I can speak that to experience. We have several Phone Animal customers that are also work with you guys that, it's just, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's so much easier to have those conversations.
Right. FSBOs, canceled, expired. Think about all that stuff. I know we're not seeing a ton of that right now, but arming yourself with this information for when the time is right, I think, is actually really valuable. Give consumers a reason to transact, right? And here's one I've got for you guys. Like, this is one we've been working on, and this is actually a preview to kind of, like, in our community, once a month we offer a marketing suite. We give our agents, like, a new suite of tools to be able to market out to their consumers. And this is the theme of this month's marketing suite, is that, what if you could turn every buyer into a cash buyer? right? So I think like we probably follow all these messaging boards of real estate agents all around the country, and their biggest gripe right now is they can't get an FHA buyer qualified or can't get an FHA buyer's offer accepted, right? They can't get any buyer with a contingency of financing their offer accepted. So what do you do? Like, what do you do with that buyer? You've got a buyer, you've worked, you've made the offers, like you've done your job, but you can't qualify them. But what if you can convert them into a cash buyer, right? What if you had Phone Animal dial every single one of these buyers, so buyer leads you've got, right? Like most of us at this point have thousands of them. What if you had them all call and said, we're going to convert you into a cash buyer and here's how, right? And the way you do this, very simply, is you're going to use one of these technology companies. The tech company that I like to use is Home Partners for America, right? So think about this. So with Home Partners for America, the consumer goes and they get qualified with Home Partners. They're getting qualified to rent the property. They're going to have to rent to own. That's the only way that they're going to get a house. But they're going to be able to pick the property that they want to buy. So what happens is they get qualified with Home Partners for America. Home Partners for America will set a ceiling and they'll say, okay, you're qualified to go look at homes that are priced up to $400,000. So now you are shopping with your client, who is technically going to be the tenant, ultimately going to be the buyer. But the real true buyer is Home Partners for America, and they pay cash for every house. No contingency. Close in 15 days. So now you're driving around with a real cash buyer in your car, right? You can make a cash offer with every single client you've got, as long as you know that the tool is available to you, right? And so many agents, when I see this, I'm like, man, you know, they're gonna go rent a house for 12 months until the market. Like, how many times have you heard, oh, we're just gonna rent until the market retracts? Well, with this, why don't you rent to own? Pick the house you want to be in, pick the neighborhood that you guys want to stay in. And you now have a year to make that exercise your option to purchase it at no additional cost. So it doesn't cost you any more money, right, to do this. Yeah. But if you as an agent don't know that that's a trick or don't know that technology, you've done your client a disservice. Like you've actually done them a disservice by not knowing that. So that trick alone should be hopefully worth their time today.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Dan. Like I can't tell you how many YouTube ads that I see is like why you shouldn't rent and why you should own.
Right.
But it stops there. It's kind of like going back to the party we were at, and it's like, hey, well, let me help you guide you through that process. Whereas instead of it's like, no, here's a very practical way on rent to own.
Right.
You just how I view that agent is way different.
Yeah. How to actually transact in what might be the most competitive market that we've seen in the last 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And there's no sign that it's changing. So if you're going, I'll go rent for 6 months or go rent for a year, and then you're going to be back in the same boat, right? There's no actual economic measurable statistic that's going to tell us today that there's going to be some sort of shift in the market, right? Most economists are predicting out to 2024, saying that we're going to be in inclining market condition until then. And then if you couple that with the fact that these institutions are representing 20% of the market today, and we're buying all of these assets, the only way to compete against these guys is with cash, right? That's it. That's the only way to play. And you can do that. These technology companies are creating ways to do this. So they're not the only ones. Home Partners does that, and Open Door offers what they call buy with Open Door, right? And you can leverage this. I've heard OfferPad's coming out with their own product to solve that exact problem, right? So by knowing and leveraging the technologies, you can have better conversations with your customers. You can actually provide just the best in class consumer experience. I'll just share a couple other things and we'll wrap it up. But here's an example of like, this is our net sheet, right? So when I'm talking about, agents will ask like, how do you provide them all these available options? Well, this is my listing presentation. This is what I actually bring to the listing presentation. There's no more trophies of me or, statistics on how many homes we've sold. The consumer doesn't care about that. They just don't care. What they do care about is like, what are they netting? And what this does is just a simple net sheet. I know it's a little hard to see on here, but what it says here in these boxes, these are all the different value propositions. So you have the traditional sale, right? So they go to market. They've got Open Door, Zillow, OfferPad, the next buyer name. We've got all the institutions down here, and we just simply net them out for the seller. And we say, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what I did for you is I went out to market and I'm providing you all your available options. I actually had these guys make an offer on your property. Like, think about the value that this provides a customer, right? Even if they were thinking about overpricing the house, now I've proven to them that the market's here, right? And then maybe we want to go find this fictitious buyer that's willing to pay this big number, but that comes with a risk, right? And I'm actually showing them the risk statistically here. And so what these charts do is just kind of give them a lay of the land. It shows them, all costs, including commissions, that these things are variable and that the game has changed, right? And so it's
is that something, is that net sheet tool, is that something that I would get if I was IREP certified?
Yeah, so this is an example of, one of the net sheet examples we have. So we have versions like this. So this is, I always say to our community that this version would be the best version. And if you had a bunch of options, this would be the best version. But we have versions that have 3 buyers, 4 buyers, 2 buyers. I mean, you name it, we've got a number of them on here. I like this one just because I think it makes you look like you spent, 15 hours creating it, when the reality is I spent 15 hours on it and you guys get to do it and it takes you 20 minutes to fill it out. So, what we say is like, just simply present all the available options, right? Consumer determines what's best for them. We all know that. 62% of the time, the consumer is listing the property traditionally. That's happening today, right? So I'm measuring that on my team every week. We understand like how many people are choosing these other options. It's less than half, right? But what I'm doing is I'm getting to the table by bringing the option, right? I'm having the conversation by simply bringing the option. And then 47% of the time, I'm representing them on the buy side. So they're selling their home and then I get to represent them on the buy side. Right. So while I may even if I have to give up some commission because they want to transact with an iBuyer technology, I'm representing them on the buy side. Right. So I'm still monetizing a full fee across the life cycle of both sides of the transactions. I think it's important for us to recognize. Sure. So I think, with this, I'm trading time for money in production, right? 0 marketing dollars spent. First meeting that we have with the client takes 30 minutes. Submit the offers to the, all the iBuyers and text takes about 15 minutes. Creating the net sheet takes another 15. Our second meeting takes 30 minutes. My total time spent, 90 minutes. So I think at JP, you and I talked about this. My agents on my team, when they get paid, I pay them I break it down for them on dollars per hour worked, right? So they log into our system and I can track how much time they're actually spending on this stuff. And sometimes the number's staggering, like they'll make $1,000 an hour, right? And I go, man, you get paid more than a doctor. You aren't that smart, so stop crying about how much money you're making.
I love you, but
you're way overpaid. So with that, man, that's what I got for you today. I think that, leaving you with, the kind of my mantra, and this is painted around our office, my team knows this to be true, is really that any set of circumstances can be leveraged for individual or collective gain, as long as we view them masterfully. We just got to change the way we think, man.
Well, thanks, Dan. This is awesome. We still have 4 minutes left here, and I'm going to ask a few questions, but cool. This is really, really good. A lot of information. I mean, I feel like I could ask you like 10, more than 10 questions, and maybe that's over a beer or something. But Matt asked a question about, and just a reminder, everybody, Dan did give a discount code of join iRep to this group, and anybody who watches the recording, does it have to be in all lowercase, all one word?
No, I don't think so. So as long as they put a join iRep, they go to iRealEstatePro.com, put in the code there, there'll be a spot to enter the discount code for join iRep, and it's $100 off our current membership there. Wow.
And again, 3,500 agents across the nation using it. So it's working. And so Matt asked, how has the pandemic affected how you work with iBuyers?
I would say that we have not changed our model, right? I didn't let the pandemic affect the way that we transacted with consumers. I wanted to keep that my model was consistent. I will tell you that there's less consumers that are accepting iBuyer offers right now. But the other thing to keep in mind is that the iBuyers recognize that quickly, and they've shifted their fees down. Like Open Door is at a 2.5% fee nationwide. So that's like they're transacting for 2.5 points. Like it's
Yeah.
really, really cheap. I remember when they first started, the fee was as high as 15%. So the convenience fee that they charge is down to 2.5 because they want to transact. So
Yeah.
I think you got to give them a chance, you know, bring the opportunity to the consumer, let the consumer decide. So I would say like the pandemic has not affected us. The only thing that I could say is the iBuyer actually had time to come up for air and get stronger. The value propositions that you're delivering now are actually stronger than the ones they had pre-pandemic for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Any, I got two questions. I'm just going to ask one though.
Yep.
Any predictions over the next 3 years of working with institutional buyers, iBuyers, these technology companies? Any predictions?
Yeah. I think you're going to see that, you know, the biggest shift I think we're going to see is that the properties are going to be traded in some sort of marketplace, right? And I think you're starting to see that with Zillow, and you're starting to see that Open Door and OfferPad are trying to create this. The race that all of these guys are playing right now, JP, is they're playing the game of like, how do we get a consumer to come into our environment and stay in that environment all the way through? Like, how do we offer them all of these other ancillary services, mortgage, title, home
insurance,
warranty, insurance, all of these other ancillary services are happening. And I think what's important for us to recognize as a piece of that is that we also can play that game, right? We have to start doing this. The challenge that I think we're going to be up against though, is that as those services become refined and they're monetizing on those services, the goal that they all have is to actually make the real estate transaction itself a zero-sum game. So they want to take their real estate commission down to zero. So the cost to transact could potentially be zero. It's going to be these ancillary services is where they're earning. So I think, you know, keeping an eye on that and how they actually transact the fee is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Well, that's the top of the hour. Dan, I won't take any more of your time. I really appreciate it. We love getting to partner with you and your team. And clearly you're very knowledgeable in this area. If you're not following Dan, I know like just one of the big benefits of the iRep program is their community, Facebook community. I see posts going out all the time, Q&As with you. So you're someone that I constantly am learning from and getting information out of there. So for that purpose, it's worth it. So anyways, thank you so much for your time. Thanks everybody. And have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, man.